Hello and welcome to the CPA Intelligence and Ethics Show. My name is Garth Sharif, and on today's show, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Adam Hibbs, who I met at the DCPA, Digital CPA conference, where the bulk of that conference focus was on artificial intelligence. And I talk about this with him, but there was this AICPA booth, which Adam works for, that had this technology called Josi. And it was something that was very appealing to me as someone who has to do research, look up audit standards when I do education courses around auditing and technology and how our profession is dealing with all these things, but also just following the standards of our profession. And sometimes that research can be really hard if you do that the traditional way by going into a database or a research library. But what if you had something to help you with your research, something maybe powered by a large language model? And that's what Adam and his team have done. And I happened to meet him at the DCPA, really amazing individual. And I asked him, and he offered to be a guest on the CPA Intelligence and Ethics show to talk about what the AICPA is doing with the technology that is available to us, large language models that power ChatGPT, behind Gemini and other models, other chatbots, but what we can do in our profession to use these, where we also have to build in trust and integrity in the output these models are giving to us. And I'm excited to tell you that I can't announce that I'm certified, but I passed the exam in the Advanced Artificial Intelligence Audit designation that is provided by AICPA, who also provides the Certified Information Systems Auditor. And that was a really great certification. I had to go through an exam and study. It was a lot of work. And I can't officially call myself certified with the AAIA, that's the acronym, Advanced Artificial Intelligence in Audit, which is a designation around knowledge of how to look at the way an organization is bringing AI into their organization. It's not about any specific AI tool or what's going to happen a few years from now. It's about the overall infrastructure, entity-wide controls. Do you have a steering committee? Even if you're a small organization, do you have an AI inventory? And I took that course because I spent a lot of time in AI working with organizations, but that course and certification was very good for me because there's a pathway for all organizations to think about using AI, specifically CPAs, that's safe, accountable, understandable, fair, and brings everybody on board. And in talking to Adam, I'll give Adam's background in a moment, this was something that they thought at the AICPA might be helpful for CPAs because CPAs have to do research. Do we want to do research on ChatGPT? Do we want to use Gemini or another model where we're not sure where it got its source information? Because part of our profession is trust. When people ask us for advice or come to us for some recommendation or analysis, they assume that we are doing the work and not just going to a chatbot or some artificial intelligence solution for the answers, not knowing if the content was really sourced from a reliable place. And it was a great conversation with Adam to talk about this software that has been launched by the AICPA, but I think speaks to the bigger role of how CPAs in particular are going to have to use these products, but be aware that because we are held to a higher standard by the public, we can't just take a large language model and maybe use it for certain work that another professional might use because there's an integrity, a trust, a fiduciary duty that we have. And if organizations that are part of our profession, like the AICPA, decide to maybe take on some of that burden and say, hey, we have a product for you, you can feel more comfortable that when you use this product inside our internal controls, that the quality of the content, the trust in what you're getting is coming from the source. In this case, the accounting standards or the auditing standards. So I was excited to talk to Adam Hibbs, fantastic, energetic individual. I'm glad you can hear our conversation. He's the Vice President, Global AI Product Development, Commercial Operations, and Licensing for the AICPA, and was one of the lead members in developing Josi, and he talks about what that software is. It's not necessarily a Josi pitch, even though I think it's a really great software, but more about what it means for the profession for us to start safely using these tools. So excited to have my conversation with Adam. Hello and welcome to the CPA Intelligence and Ethics Show. My name is Garth Sharif, and I'm excited today to be joined by Adam Hibbs, who's going to be speaking to us about all the developments at the AICPA, but specifically around artificial intelligence. I had the pleasure of meeting Adam at the DCPA in the National Harbor, beginning of December last year. What were you doing there? How did we meet? You want to recap our meeting?
So when we looked across each other, our eyes met, and then we just... So I was actually at Digital CPA last year, and I was showcasing a product that we've just recently released at the AICPA. And that product is called Josi. But I was actually standing at a booth, and I think when you came over, I already had a few people just crowding around having a bit of a chat about what I was showing, what was on the screen. But we just started having a bit of a chat about AI, the product, and how all these things are changing over time. And I think we just kind of went, well, actually, we've got a conversation here.
Yeah, and I remember that because I went over to that booth and I met your colleague there before I saw you. And then you have quite a energetic personality, as we'll come to learn here. And it was one of those things, in this space, in this podcast, we talk a lot about where AI can work in the CPA world and different spaces. But one of the obvious ones to me, and it's always been obvious, was research and where we look at the standards. I work with the audit standards, the accounting standards. And so I had just done a podcast for another organization called LumaQ, an audit update standard. I had to read the standards, all the audit update standards myself. I'm like, isn't there an easier way to do research? And then your booth, when I was at the DCPA, just was like a shining beacon. And that's what it is, right?
I think we might have actually had a shiny beacon at the time. I think we had a hologram that was running in the background when you came over, a little fan that actually said Josi on it as well. So it really was actually shining out like a beacon.
Yeah, it was to me. And especially since I came off that experience and there was a hologram. And I thought, where has this been my whole life? I also thought this is one of the best ways to get CPAs involved with AI. So I want to ask you about that, about Josi, how it came to be developed, where it's going. How do you see CPAs interacting with it? Is it with reluctance? Is it with enthusiasm, with skepticism?
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of a background of the journey. And everything, as always, starts with an idea, but where does the idea come from? So within the AICPA, one of my pieces of my role is I work with the licensing team that we have. I've got a small licensing team, and we rent out, lease, whatever you want to call it, license the standards for a range of our different products and standards in particular. And that's where we have something called the Online Professional Library, which has a massive treasure trove of information inside of it. And we were starting to get inquiries from people saying, hey, can we put this into our generative AI, our AI, our AGI, whatever it may actually be? And I went, this is interesting. I wonder if we can actually do something here ourselves. Because part of my background is, whilst I'm working for a membership not-for-profit organization, is I've come from large technology organizations in the past, which has taught me enough to be dangerous, is probably one way to put it. Where I kind of go, well, actually, I know how the architecture of these things are fundamentally built, even if some of what's inside the boxes move around. And I thought, there's a possibility for us to do this ourselves. And I put that into the leadership team at the AICPA. And we looked at a few different options of build, buy, or where we're going to be going with this thing. And I was like, you know what? I think we can actually do this with the team that we've got in place. We've got the right intermeshing of people and skills, interest and energy to actually make this happen. And that happened a little while ago. But what happened at the start of January last year was, with Mark incoming, one of the first decisions that he made was, let's go ahead and do this. Because we'd already tested it at the Future of Finance Summit in San Diego the previous December to say, this is what conceptually it looks like. What do you think? And the reception that we had was overwhelmingly positive. This looks amazing. Why are we not doing this? We didn't have an answer as to why we were not doing it. So guess what? January swings around. Here we are. We're doing it. And then we just went, all right, we've got to do this right. We want to give a great experience for our members. And we want to make sure that we can actually serve people of all sized organizations at the same time with something that's really scalable, useful, and very simple and easy to use. Because the tagline that I'm effectively on for Josi at the moment is simple, powerful, and trusted. So we then went ahead and built the product, and we actually got it pulled together from start to finish in roughly 5 or so months or thereabouts. And that was from the big green get-go, had a conceptual view of it through to we actually had something that was saleable and available in the market. And what we really realized was that we have a lot of the standards that are so useful, as you say. Like I was speaking to someone today who said, yeah, I remember when she first started her job, her role was actually replacing the pages of the worn out manuals that were being used of the standards. And that's clearly a while ago, but it's like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. Wow, that's where you begin when you start to learn how these things work. I had various thoughts that I can't share on a podcast, but all of it was surprised.
Yeah.
And it was at that point when you realize lots of things are starting to come together at once. You've got a movement in the industry where people are starting to actually go, how do we use AI for the right use case for something that could actually be of genuine value? How do we make sure it starts to get into the right hands of the right people? And who's actually going to get the most value out of this at the same time? And we realized there was a great opportunity to serve small CPAs in particular in the US. But the thing is, we created a scalable product on purpose on a reusable platform. All these pieces are key to why we did what we did, to then say, well, actually, we can take this to other places in the future as well. Point being, you think about 1 to 5 years ahead when you do these pieces, not just what's the problem that I'm solving right now. How is it going to evolve?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part because we often talk in the AI space, and that's one of the principles. Like, what problem are you trying to solve before you get into the AI? And sometimes it's backwards. And we heard a lot of that at the DCPA. Like, identify your problem first. And with Josi, because we'll talk about what this is. Not everyone who's listening might know, but I'll tell you what my problem was, which is why I was attracted to this. Is I had just done that podcast from the McHugh. And I do this update, and because I work on the audit and assurance standards. And it's such a manual thing. I had to go to the FASB site. I had to go through all the things, and it's all kind of SQL, very old school, kind of searching for what I need. And it takes time. It's effort. Is it necessary in this space where you have these generative AI models that can do some of the work for you? So when I saw this, I said, oh. And so it would have solved my problem had I learned about it before I had to do the podcast. But what problem were you, like, when you and Mark big on AI, what was the specific problem that you thought Josi, and it's Josi, right?
Yes, that's right. You got it
We'll get
exactly
to,
right.
what does that stand for? What is Josi as a name?
Is this where I ask you, do you remember?
I was told this and I forgot. I keep thinking
That's
about a
fine.
band.
That's fine. So a small bit of context, but it wasn't all part of that piece. So I'm living in the UK, but I work globally for the AICPA. And we were looking for a name that actually made sense and resonated with what we were trying to do. We went through a few different variations. And while I was doing some research, I came across the name of this chap by the name of Josiah Wedgwood. Josiah Wedgwood. Now, I don't know if there are any pottery enthusiasts that are listening to this particular call, but Wedgwood pottery is a very famous brand in the UK, and I expect it's probably global as a result of that. But what he did at the time was, while he was going through an economic depression, I think it was in the late 1700s, as he basically looked at how he was doing his accounting, and he devised a new system to effectively look at the cost accounting side of it, as opposed to just the checks and balance of what's going in and what's going out. And what he found off the back of that was not just how much marginal cost or average variable cost maybe for each individual product it was, but he realized that as a result of that, money was missing. And what he discovered was that his head clerk was embezzling from him. So in my simple head, I kind of go, well, that's basically straight down the auditing route, right? Because he identified a discrepancy and an error. Now, Josiah Wedgwood, it's a bit of a mouthful. So I thought, why don't I make that a little bit shorter? I thought wedge doesn't work, wood doesn't work. Josiah, still a little bit long. Okay, so let's just make it Josi.
Josi. You are a performer, Adam. You have given the audience the theatrical, well-formed. I think I got a part of this, but I don't remember the pottery side, the embezzlement side. This is good stuff. And for our pottery listeners out there, this is real gold.
It's going to send it into the stratosphere over the pottery.
Joe Rogan, here we come. So that's the origin of the name. But coming back to that original question, what problem did you think AI, because we're talking about this because there's a large language model functionality. There's a part of this we can talk about with generative AI. But what problem were you looking to solve with Josi?
Well, there are actually several problems. And funnily enough, we've actually discovered new problems that we're solving as we've been going along at the same time. But the original premise is, okay, we've got a large language model here, fine, but so is ChatGPT, so is Claude, so is everything else. What's actually relevant for our people that we want to help in the auditing and accounting profession? And there are a few parts that immediately start to come to mind, one of which is those large language models are excellent, but they are also looking at everything everywhere all the time, just like the movie. But what you actually really need when you're in the auditing and accounting area and assurance at the same time is you need not just surety of the answer that you're going to be getting, but also to be able to prove it at the same time, right? The evidentiary piece is actually very relevant for the attestations that you're going to be putting on the quality of the responses that you're putting in. So what we've done with Josi, one of the first things we did as part of the focus group testing was you don't just get a summary of a curated data set, because Josi doesn't look at everything. It looks around about 40,000 pieces of data or thereabouts that have been loaded into a secure location. And what it then does within that boundary view is it says, okay, here's your answer. Here's a nice, simple response of how that should be interpreted. And then here's the evidence. So you get cited footnotes to then take you directly to that part, and it gives you an excerpt out of whatever it may be. Right. Because you're right, it's got all of our internal pieces here, fine. But what it does do beyond that is we've also included the PCAOB standards and the FASB codifications. And we're actually on the verge of getting the GASB codifications loaded in the next few weeks as well. So it's frankly comprehensive, but it doesn't have opinion pieces in there. It has, this is the situation in there.
I work in the space of AI, but I work at it almost as a voice for the general CPA audience to understand. I reflect some of their challenges, which is we are sometimes resistant to change, we have skepticism, we sometimes a little slow to adopt technology that can really help us. And there's good reasons for that, and sometimes we need to have that skepticism, but there are other times where we need to maybe take a look at what the technology is. And I'm taking this certification from AICPA, the advanced, it's got a heck of an acronym, Advanced Audit in Artificial Intelligence, AAIA, and AI. It's
lots of double A's there.
There's a lot of stuff in there. But it's an interesting designation because it's supposed to give those that work in the audit and assurance space an AI-focused look at controls and governance and the idea of what do we do where we don't go into the programming language and the code, but we need to look at risk assessment. It's fascinating. Because I was thinking about this when it comes to Josi. Because part of what you're saying, too, is where is the information coming from? What's the data quality? Where is the source? Because if you go to ChatGPT and I look up a standard, a FASB standard, whatever it is, what is the source? It's not directly pipelining into the direct source. It might be getting it ad hoc from somewhere else or from whatever modeling it's bringing it up. So you worry about data integrity, data quality. That's why I would never suggest that a practitioner should go to ChatGPT or Claude or any large language model chatbot to get citations for standards. They need to go to the source. And that's why I did it for LimaQ. I mean, obviously I could have just tapped in, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what's new for the standards for this year and what I should let people know. But it's a huge risk, not just hallucination, but for quality. But that's what Josi was trying to address.
You're so right, because there's lots of different aspects to how you address that risk. And one of the pieces that you've touched on there is if you go to these, they've got a few issues associated with them. Great product, but they're biased as well at the same time. And we haven't built bias purposely into Josi. We've just said, you don't have to be nice, you don't have to be rude, but that's part of the personality, for better or for worse, of a lot of the LLMs that are out there at the moment, and they are there to please. We didn't do that on purpose with Josi. We knew the audience that it was going for just needed surety of the response. Right. And I did a nice little test with ChatGPT, and I asked it a question, and I asked Josi the same question. And I asked it the same question again within the same stream in ChatGPT, and it gave me a slightly different answer. I asked the same question again within Josi, it gave me the same answer. And then I did the same question again with ChatGPT, it gave me a bit of a different answer again. And then I did it with Josi, and guess what? It gave me the same answer as Josi had already. So it was consistent, and that's the quality of what you're actually looking for. But moreover, on top of that, Josi has also got what you might call a fail-safe built into it as well, because all the GPTs out there, they're going to give you an answer, right? They will always give you an answer. But Josi will say, actually, you know what? I don't think I can give you an answer on that because it's not contained within our information set. Right. Or you need to clarify your question. So we built safeguards into the quality, the output of it. Nothing is ever going to be 100%, and I'm not going to make that out as the case. But we built those safeguards in because of the audience that we built it for in the first place.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating conversation as I'm taking this certification, because you're talking about model drift, bias, systematic biases. These are what auditors might eventually have to look at when they're going in to do a financial statement audit where there's components of AI in the financial reporting process to understand, are there issues with their AI development lifecycle? But when you have it contained like this, you do have the big thing for CPAs, which you said was consistency and confidence in the output. Because if you're writing an accounting memo, you have 3 options, you need to go through maybe variable interest entities, and you ask ChatGPT and gives you some information and you act on that, that's going to be difficult to defend later on versus going to the source. I mean, I don't know if that's something you were thinking about.
No, it is, because one of the other bits, because you're just triggering different points in my head as we talk, is what we've done is it's always going back to the source that is up to date as of 1 second ago type thing. Right. Because it is always up to date. Some of the LLMs out there, they operate in terms of their knowledge and thinking off a previous iteration, even if they're doing a current search, if that makes sense. but Josi is always going to be up to date with everything that it's pulling out of there as well. And the other bit for that too is that what are the safeguards that you've put around how the information that you put into it is going to be dealt with? Because a lot of the agreements that are in place for a lot of the large LLMs when you're going for the professional version of whatever it may be, there's still within the fine print of, oh, we may use any of your queries and they form part of the model for the rest of its life type thing. With Josi, what we've done is we've used a retrieval augmented generation model to operate in the background. So it's only doing the thought for that.
Right.
Any of the queries for that particular user don't go into the actual model itself. They get separate for that individual. And that's on a multi-tenanted platform on the Microsoft Azure cloud platform.
I played with it a little bit at the DCPA, because what's the benefit here? It can save you time. If you need to go to the source, you can, but the way you might go to it is through a funnel there, right? It's just rather than just reading the paragraphs of the standards, I can use Josi to direct me with some level of confidence. And so the next question, and this is the big part of this show, right? This is the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's the people. Then there's the people. The people are CPAs, and I'm not going to generalize, but and I don't
I'm not going
think
to comment then.
as one, I feel I'm talking about my own people here. I don't have as many of the maybe the stereotypical tendencies, but part of this would be trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trust about like whether there's a couple of people, right? There's somebody who says use ChatGPT, Claude, and like any of these things, and so they might not use Josi. But there's others who are now. There's more and more, of course, and especially maybe demographically specifically that are starting to move into using the chatbots. And the question is, how do they build trust with this? Where is it where they say between ChatGPT, as an example, or nothing, and Josi, where do I feel like Josi allows me to feel like the risk assessment part of the CPA brain is being addressed by what Josi does? Like, how have you seen that conversation? You talk to a lot of people. You're very social. Like, how have you felt that conversation is? How do you feel like that flow is as people start to use it?
It's one of those things that's really interesting because if you think about how I described how it works, it's actually marking its own homework for you at the same time because it gives you that summary and then it gives you that citation that you can then actually validate. And that's a really key part of the trust piece because it can prove, not suggest or otherwise, that the answer is right. But it also has a feedback loop built in there. So you can say, actually, this is a little bit of a tweak here, there, or otherwise. But what I found is that once people start using it, they absolutely hammer it in the best possible way. We've been watching the growth of the product in it. Yes, everything starts at small volumes, but the growth rate of this has been pretty impressive. Like we're talking 20, 30% growth of chats per user that are using it month on month. Like that's a huge amount of growth. And we grew by 50% of the user base last month as well. And it was 100% the month before that. So all numbers start off small, but once they grow, that's showing the trust is there.
That's why I wanted to talk to you, because the question is, what is our interaction with things like research now? Mm-hmm. What are students learning and becoming future CPAs and CPAs? And I would say Josi is probably the best type of architecture for CPAs versus ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, you can use those things, but as long as you go back to the source, right? As long as you critically think, here's what ChatGPT said about an accounting issue or an auditing issue, let me actually go to the standard. So if you do that step, it might take you more time. The feeling I will have, and I think this is not just anecdotal, is that people don't take that step. It's just easy not to take that step.
Yeah.
It's eventually, even as much as you want to take that step, as you get more comfortable with ChatGPT or a chatbot, it draws down your defenses easily. It just all of a sudden, it's gone. And you had high defenses going in, and it's gone, and you just don't ask that secondary question about, oh, should I check that or double check that? I've had this myself. And so I would think something like Josi would help that eventuality to as people use these things.
It would. And what I'd say is, as more and more people have used it, the feedback that we've been getting has been growing around the different aspects that it can actually be used for. And that's where, obviously, I'm part of the team that created, developed, and brought it to the market. But I sit there and I still play with it myself and I go, I wonder if it can do this, which is obviously what you might call an AI mindset. But that's where I've been curiously and pleasantly surprised with things that I've been trying out. Because yes, you can use it as a research tool to ask an extremely advanced question around whatever AEC it may be or otherwise, and it'll give you a nice, easy to follow response for that. But you can also ask it more abstract questions. And some of the questions I've asked it, for example, was before the quality management standards came into effect on the 15th of December. And that was, okay, can you create a plan for me around how I need to respond to the QMS? That was literally it. And then it came out with a step-by-step instruction of the things that you need to consider, not just here is the relevant standard for it and the citation. It said, here's how you go about it. And I was like, that is powerful. That is absolutely powerful.
And I'll tell you the reason why it's powerful is because it's coming from a trusted source too, right? Because yes, you could ask ChatGPT the same thing. Give me the quality management steps for me to be ready for PCAB inspection, peer inspection, so that my firm is ready, whatever. That should be motivated by inspections to do that standard. But it's just, to me, the trust. So I just want to ask you more existentially. So we look at Josi, maybe existentially, for the CPA profession interacting with AI, because you're getting the frontline look. You're seeing it uptick. Like, how do you feel we're doing here? Because you're seeing the uptick, you're interacting, you're hearing both the things people like about it and don't. Where do you see things are, like even from a year ago, when it comes to CPAs, or relationship with these large language models? What's your experience right now with it?
I read a lot about what's happening in terms of sentiment around AI in the market. And there's a lot of discussion over the last year on how AI is going to be hit, it's going to be big, it's going to be X. And it's starting to hit that for the right reasons in the right places and the wrong reasons in the wrong places at the same time. And that point that you made around what is the issue that it solves, or what is the specific use case that it's going to deal with, is really relevant. Because what you realize is that people get caught in an AI bubble and say, I must do something that's AI related, not really have a plan around why it's actually going to be successful. And where I think we're getting to in 2026 is that there's a maturation occurring of where people's thinking was around AI last year. Of not the hype is gone, but actually we're trying to now align it into an outcome-focused goal for our organizations for the adoption of AI. Not just it could be good over there, it could be good in this. And that's where we've talked about Josi as a research tool, for example. But back to the point around QMS, you can actually use it as a wider tool, because you can use it as a learning tool as well for new CPAs that are in. You can use it for CPAs that are going, well, actually, I'll just step out of, but across into the A&A space from tax or whatever it may be, and I want to understand what's going on there. And it can give them a bit of a leg up to get started. But beyond that, what you can also do, back to your point around how we're using AI, what it's actually done is it's created a document management system to an effect as well. Because it always has the up-to-date standards, but it also has all of the up-to-date guides, which contain all the templates that we have as well for things like engagement letters. And that's where what it will also do is you can say, give me a draft engagement letter for the construction industry, and it will say, here it is, which means that you also deal with issues around people corrupting files, saving names, all that stuff where someone's accidentally put an X in front of a Z or whatever it may be inside of an engagement letter as an example. So you're actually starting to address a wider number of pieces, which is actually around driving consistency across the industry, which is a completely different point to research.
It's interesting because I just think when I saw Josi in your explanation, I just thought it's not just Josi, which is doing really well and on an uptake, but it's just more almost maybe a model that we think about, because the profession is going to take on some risks as CPAs get more comfortable with these models, but don't really understand or have their defenses lowered, where not just with standards, but with other things that they just potentially use information that wasn't the accurate information, and they get caught in the press or the news by using it as a basis of opinion or to make a decision, and that hurts the reputation of the profession. And I did want to ask this question. So, like, how much of you, like on your side, on your development side, think about it in terms of, yes, it won't answer certain questions, so it has a fail-safe that way. Like, how much do you feel like, in that example of an engagement letter, that you feel pretty comfortable that somebody could take it and use it, and it doesn't come back to you if there's something off about it, or something that was missed? I guess that's a question. I ask hard questions on this show, but
it's a great question, and the idea of the show is to ask questions and get answers. Really, the simple answer that I can give you for that is we've showed it to, I don't know how many people, and I've been able to both see their face-to-face reaction. But before we even did the release to the market, we did a lot of focus group testing as well around what do you need, how does it look, what features would you like, And one of the first things they actually did was test the engagement letter to see what does it actually come up with, because they knew as a subject matter expert that it was embedded within all the different guides and there are a range of different engagement letters. And they said, yeah, actually, that works. And it was from that point on, I was like, okay, great. It's not just the research side of it. It's where it becomes a workflow tool and a standardization tool beyond that. And that's where I was like, okay, this is actually expanding out the use case for it too at the same time, whether you're a large or a small practice or in or outside BNI at the same time.
This is why I wanted to have you on here, because I just thought this was one of the most practical things I'd seen, especially backed by the organization that a lot of us belong to, in terms of addressing both the risk side of these large language models and a viable use of it that gets to risk, gets to more trust, and makes us feel more comfortable, and something that a lot of practitioners, in some ways you would hope this encourages more practitioners to go to the standards. I still work as an audit trainer, and sometimes I'm like, have you read the quality management standards? Have you, you've got your hands dirty with it? And a lot of times it's form-based. They're using the forms to drive their knowledge. And it is good to actually read the standards, but it is hard. It's a hard ask. It's a lot of time. Not always fun to read. And maybe Josi works on that piece. You talked about the educational piece as well.
Yeah, you can just ask it a question. And if it's got the knowledge in there, it'll give you a useful summary of that. And you might say, actually, what does it mean over this? So you can follow your own curiosity path, which is a different learning experience too. You must consume all of this. And you might remember 10% of a massive piece of parts, but everyone knows the best way to learn is something that you're interested in. That's the best way to retain information.
Yeah, it's not just Josi. I think yours is one of the best sort of examples of what our profession can do to start to both have us use these tools as they develop, but also protect the profession, right? The reputation, because we just, it's going to happen. We're going to have CPAs that use some of these outside tools that are very powerful, but just don't do the extra step to check or whatever, and something might go wrong.
Totally. And it's one of those things where I mentioned briefly around, it doesn't reference any external material whatsoever, but it also doesn't have more than you need at the same time, because we didn't want to put a range of other pieces in, because we wanted to retain the integrity of what's in there as well, because obviously we do a lot of white papers and considerations and submissions as part of our advocacy work. But it's really key just to keep the integrity of what's actually coming out of it.
Yeah, and I learned this is model drift. And model drift can happen when or it's what they call it. I'm studying for the exam at the same time as I'm interviewing you, but overfitting, underfitting, right? The overfitting, underfitting problem where if you give it too much, it overfits, it can have drifts. And that's exactly how these other models work, right? They're just stuffing these things, and they can answer anything, but are they giving you information you can rely on? Adam, I'll leave you with this question as we come to a close. It's been really informative. I did think Josi was a great example of ways in which our profession can use AI and also learn how to use these tools, right, in a safe way. Where do you see things going for Josi? What's next in terms of where your product goes?
We're trying to avoid AI drift, but we do have thoughts about how could we make this a more globally interesting product. And there's various different things in the background that have to work on that. There's no guarantees, but that's part of what we're doing. So that's looking at the content that's contained within it. Same vein, same area. I don't want to put text in there, for example, at the moment, because there's an interaction, but it's not the most complementary fit. But how do you look at it from a global perspective and make it a more globally appealing product from that perspective? That's one side of it. The other part is actually, how do we keep evolving this with what's occurring in the market as well at the same time? Because we have, even since I saw you in December, we've released new pieces into the lab testing part of Josi for people who are already paying users, so they can access new features to test. And that's, for example, where we've added voice to prompt. So you can actually record it directly in, goes voice to prompt. You might be running around doing a thing, Garth, or you're, I don't know, getting up to whatever. You can just record it directly onto your phone, just like you do with Gemini, with anything else like that. And it'll just put the prompt in. Okay, that's handy. That's really useful. But the other part, apart from when you're even in front of a client from that, is that we've also started to look at new features. And one of the things we're working on at the moment is the document upload feature. So you can get a summary of all the standard document types that will then feed into what you're looking at for that as well at the same time. Now, that's not released out to the wider public yet. That's in the testing phase with the buying people. But frankly, we've got plans for this piece because we've designed it in a modular way on purpose to make sure we can actually fit and retrofit and keep it current for a while to come.
Yeah, it sounds like you're able to build on this really well because the core is there. And I actually did think, I had thought about this before this because I work with the standards. I'm like, when will somebody figure out something to create some model around the standards? Because what do you need for these models? You need structure for them to be like consistent, robust standards. it's a beautiful place for it. It's like our profession actually lines up really well for that.
It's like the perfect use case for it. And when we
Perfect
did
use case.
build it as well, it's probably a recognition that we built it, recognizing you may want to put other types of things into that, replicate the same model in a different field. But also, we purposefully built it, back to your point, for the profession. We are a not-for-profit in a way that we could actually scale it either vertically or horizontally at the same time, because the RISE 2040 program that's going through as well is actually going to leverage part of the same platform for different purposes. So whilst it's not a Josi, we went, how do we build this thing so we can actually future-proof it properly? And what you find out there is a lot of people say, okay, well, I've built an AI product using Claude Code and I've got an application that's built over here. But what it doesn't have is that same replicability, if that makes sense, because we can leverage the infrastructure investment that we put in this to make more value come through, but also make it familiar at the same time because it's coming out of the same voice each time too.
Yeah, no, I think it's just really interesting. So it was really great to meet you, Adam. I'm glad you were able to just provide us more information about Josi. And also, I just think it's an overall look at some of the concerns that CPAs have. We have to get with it. I know we are. Times are moving. We're forced to move with the times, but I just thought Josi was a great example of what we can do as a profession and what you guys are doing. We'll leave information about how to maybe look at Josi in our show notes so that people can click and take a look at what Josi is all about. But I want to thank you for your time, and it was great meeting you. And hopefully I'll see you at another conference here, another story. And you're a very good people person, so I'll
thank you very much.
See you again.
I will be stateside at Engage USA. We will have a Josi booth there. And I'll also be back at Digital CPA in December of this year as well. So I'll definitely be over there. If you're there, come and say hi.
Yeah, Engage is just so big. I always have to it's almost like to me, like taking a deep breath and going into outer space with all the things that are happening. So I might see you at Engage. DCPA I'll come back to.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Adam.